This investigation resists the easy answer. Not the Freemasons, not the Illuminati, not any named Brotherhood with initiation rituals and membership rolls. The operational evidence doesn't point to a formal organization. It points to something more durable and more difficult to dismantle. A coordinated policy, sustained across multiple generations of the administrative class, maintained through professional culture rather than secret meetings. A consensus so thoroughly embedded in the institutions it produced that the people who maintain it today don't know they're maintaining it. I am going to resist the temptation that this investigation offers, the temptation to name a secret society, to point at the Freemasons, or the Jesuits, or the Illuminati, or any other named organization and say, they did it. They erased Tartaria. They coordinated the cartographic updates and the archival destructions and the educational reforms and the building code revisions and the monetary resets. They are the hidden hand behind the pattern of coordinated erasure that this investigation has been documenting. I am going to resist that temptation because naming a secret society closes the investigation rather than advancing it. It provides a satisfying answer that stops the inquiry at exactly the point where the inquiry should be most productive. And because the operational evidence I have been examining does not point toward any of the named organizations that conspiracy history has traditionally offered, it points towards something with a different operational signature, something that looks less like a secret brotherhood, with initiation rituals and membership rolls, and more like a network, a coordination mechanism, a system for achieving aligned outcomes across multiple institutions and multiple national jurisdictions without the formality of a named organization. Let me describe what the operational evidence shows. I have been documenting, across these investigations, a series of changes that occurred in a specific historical window, roughly 1750 to 1850, across multiple European nations and their colonial extensions. Cartographic changes, the simultaneous dissolution of Tartaria from the maps of French, English, Dutch, German, and Spanish cartographers. Administrative changes, the parallel restructuring of archival and educational systems in Portugal, France, Britain, Prussia, and Russia in the same decades. Economic changes, the sequential installation of central banking systems across the same nations in the same period. Architectural changes, the coordinated campaign of occupation, renaming, and eventual selective demolition of the pre-reset urban infrastructure. These changes happened simultaneously or in close enough succession to constitute a coordinated program across institutions and jurisdictions that had no formal coordinating mechanism. What kind of network can produce simultaneous, coordinated outcomes across multiple sovereign nations without a formal organizational structure? There are historical models, the Republic of Letters, the informal network of European scholars in the 16th and 17th centuries, who maintained correspondence across national boundaries and produced a shared intellectual culture that transcended political divisions. The international commercial networks of the great trading houses, whose relationships across multiple nations enabled coordinated action in commercial markets without formal organizational structure. The diplomatic networks of the great powers, whose shared code of practice produced coordinated international behavior without a formal international governing body. The Tartarian Erasure has the operational character of a coordinated diplomatic and administrative program. Not a scholarly network, not a commercial network. A network of state actors, of people with administrative authority in multiple sovereign jurisdictions, operating with a shared objective and a shared method for achieving it. The cartographic updates required cartographers, but the cartographers operated under royal and state patronage. The archival reforms required archivists, but the archivists reported to ministers and sovereigns. The educational restructuring required educators, but the educational institutions operated under state authority. The coordinating mechanism was not a secret brotherhood. It was the network of the administrative class itself, the people who ran the states, connected by the diplomatic and social relationships that the aristocratic administrative class of 18th century Europe maintained across national boundaries. This is less dramatic than a secret society. It is also more plausible. And it produces a specific operational signature that is visible in the historical record, if you know what to look for. The signature of coordinated state action is found in the diplomatic correspondence of the period, in the letters between ministers and ambassadors, in the private communications of the people who ran the states, not in the official correspondence, which is already in the public record and which has been thoroughly studied. In the private correspondence, the personal letters, the communications between individuals who held official positions but who were writing to each other as members of the same social and intellectual network, rather than as representatives of sovereign states. The private correspondence of the late 18th century European administrative class shows patterns of shared concern about specific topics that the official diplomatic correspondence of the same period does not address. The specific topics include the management of populations in transition, the documentary treatment of pre-existing infrastructure, the coordination of cartographic revision programs, and the standardization of educational curricula across multiple jurisdictions. These topics appear in the private correspondence of multiple figures in multiple national contexts, with a consistency and a specificity that suggests shared discussion of shared problems at shared social occasions. At the international aristocratic gatherings, the scientific academies, the informal but enormously significant social networks of the late 18th century European elite, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry that became prominent in the late 18th century is worth examining in this context, not because it organized the erasure, but because it provides a visible, institutional form of exactly the kind of network I'm describing. An organization that crossed national boundaries, that enrolled members of the administrative and intellectual elite, that provided a shared vocabulary and a shared set of symbolic references that allowed members to communicate across national and cultural contexts, and that had a specific interest in the management of knowledge. What was preserved, what was transmitted, what was kept within the network, and what was made public. The Masonic lodges of the late 18th century were meeting places for exactly the class of people whose coordinated action produced the Tartarian Erasure. I am not saying Freemasonry organized the erasure. I am saying that Freemasonry, as a visible institutional form of the elite coordination network that existed in this period, shows the operational character of the kind of network that could have produced the erasure. The same people, the same connections, the same shared interest in the management of historical memory and the standardization of knowledge systems. The lodges were not the conspiracy. They were one visible expression of the coordinating mechanism that operated across multiple institutional forms, formal and informal, named and unnamed, across the same historical period. What I find most significant about the operational signature of the Tartarian Erasure is its gradualism. It was not accomplished in a single decisive act. The cartographic updates happened over decades. The archival reforms happened over generations. The educational restructuring happened over a century. The building code revisions happened over multiple legislative cycles. The monetary reforms happened in sequence, nation by nation, over a period of 200 years. This is not the signature of a single conspiracy directed by a single organization. It is the signature of a sustained policy, maintained across multiple generations of the administrative class, updated and adapted as circumstances changed.
Pursued with the patience of people who understood that what they were managing was a long-term project requiring long-term commitment.
The heirs of the initial coordinators maintained the policy not because they were members of the same secret society their predecessors had founded. They maintained it because the policy had become embedded in the institutional culture of the administrative class itself. Because it had been internalized by the educational systems that trained the administrative class. Because it had become, over generations, not a conspiracy, but a consensus. The consensus that the official history that had been constructed was correct, that the questions it foreclosed were appropriately foreclosed, that the evidence it ignored was appropriately ignored.
A consensus maintained not by a secret brotherhood, but by the ordinary mechanisms of institutional culture. Professional rewards for conformity, professional penalties for dissent.
The accumulated social pressure of working within a system that has already decided what is and what isn't a legitimate question. The Invisible Brotherhood is not a society. It is a consensus. It has no membership roles, no initiation rituals, no secret handshake. It has something more durable than any of those things. It has the force of professional and institutional culture, reproduced in each generation by the educational systems that the erasure itself had restructured.
The people who maintain the consensus today are not conspirators.
They are professionals doing their jobs in institutions that were built in the specific period of the Tartarian Erasure to produce exactly the professional culture that maintains the consensus. They are the final product of the longest-running information management program in modern history. And they don't know it, because the program was so successful that its own history has been absorbed into the consensus it produced. That is the most sophisticated form of erasure, not the one that burns the archive, the one that builds the school. If the Tartarian Erasure was accomplished not by a conspiracy with a name, but by a consensus reproduced through the educational systems and professional cultures that the erasure itself constructed, how would you even begin to see it from inside it? And what would it look like to step outside? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who dismisses conspiracy theories but has never questioned institutional consensus.